Well, good Friday afternoon. It's time to look at a new action camera. This one is from ThiEYE, the ThiEYE E7, a native 4K action camera with image stabilization at 4K, 30 frames a second, coming right up. So today we're looking at the E7 from ThiEYE. Now the packaging is not that cool packaging that they've been doing lately, but a box. But you know what? That's fine. Inside the box you're going to find the waterproof case, which is supposed to be good for 60 meters, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit later on. It has a 360-degree little swivel on the bottom base, which is very nice. Inside the case, of course, the camera, the E7 4K, native 4K with electronic image stabilization. Now, this camera does not come with a lot of goodies. If you take a look inside the box, this is what you get. Not a whole lot, but you know what? It's all about the camera. Now, the battery on this is an 1100 milliamp hour battery, and I want to touch on something. I've had other people mention the Picasso. Does it work in the ThiEYE? And yes, those batteries are interchangeable. Now let's look at some of the specs on this camera. It has an iCatch V50 chipset in it. Its lens is 7-layer glass. The image sensor is a Panasonic 34112. But you know, let's get down to what really matters and checking out some of the image quality with this camera. Well, it's a pretty day in Texas, so we're going to test out the new ThiEYE E7. And I want to get some good video images, so I'm going to take it to the place that I enjoy the best, which is the duck park. We're going to go there right now. Now we're at the duck park. It's very windy today, so I'm sure the microphones are going to pick up a lot of the wind, which I apologize in advance. I know it looks very cloudy, but today is supposed to be the best day that we're going to have. Considering tomorrow and Sunday we are going to have a huge cold front come through. So right now it's 4K, 30 frames per second. That's a big dude right there. Alright, 4K, 30 frames a second. This is with image stabilization off. This is a nice normal walk. Now 4K, 30 frames a second with the electronic image stabilization on. This is just handheld and just a nice normal walk. This is 2.7K, 30 frames a second, image stabilization on. Now 1080p at 60 frames a second. Now it's kind of weird that the iCatch V50 chipset can do 4K at 30 frames a second with image stabilization, but it doesn't offer 1080p at 30. It only does 1080p at 60. So that may be something that they can add on. I see it in the menu system. It just is not lit up to actually use it, which is a little weird. Now 720 to 120 frames a second, and we'll slow down this image now. Let's see what the slow-mo looks like. 4K at 30 again. He's a talker. And by the way, if you are a ThiEYE E7 owner, or you bought the ThiEYE T5 Edge and you saw my previous video, I'll put a link to that right up here, talking about the audio issue. ThiEYE has released a new firmware as of today, February the 9th, even though it's dated February the 10th, but remember, time difference. But it also addresses the audio, and guess what? They flipped the noise reduction on the audio for wind noise. They flipped it correctly. So when you have wind noise on, that's when the audio is going to be really tinny, but it takes out all that wind noise. And when you turn the audio noise reduction off, then you get the full stereo sound. And yes, this does have stereo on the audio, which is nice to have on an action camera instead of that mono signal. I think the ducks have gotten used to me coming out here because they're all gathering when I come up, because I know I usually bring bread for them. Let's see how much it crops in the image with image stabilization on or off. Right now it's 4K, 30 frames a second. Image stabilization is off. I'm standing in the same spot. Image stabilization on, 4K at 30. So we'll see how much it actually crops in the image. But you know, like I've said before, in order to give you good image stabilization, you have to crop in the image. That's just the fact of life. This is not hardware driven image stabilization, it's software, so you have to give up a little bit, but it gives you really smooth footage. Okay, 30 frames a second, indoor light test. This is with the kitchen lights off. Going into the library where it's dark. 4K, 30 frames a second with auto low light on, kitchen light still off. Back into the library. See how that looks, if you can see the piano. Remember I said that they corrected the noise wind reduction. Flip it around just to let you know. Right now it's with the wind noise reduction turned off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now with the wind noise reduction turned on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what are my final thoughts on the E7 from ThiEYE? Let's talk about some of the pros. It has very nice 4K. It has image stabilization at 4K. I like the audio. It's nice stereo signal and it sounds very robust, and it's definitely a little bit of boost in the audio gain as well. I like the build quality of it, is on par with ThiEYE. I like the fact that they've been paying attention to firmware updates, and they've been updating a lot of their cameras, which means that they're being very proactive, and I like that fact, especially since they must have watched my other video about the audio being flipped on the firmware, and they corrected it. I like the fact that it's got a battery hinge drawer on the bottom, because, you know, I'm very fond of those. And I also like the fact that it's got a 1/4 screw on the bottom. So now to talk about a couple of the cons of this camera. The first thing that comes to mind is they do not offer 4K at 24 frames a second. And there's a lot of filmmakers out there that prefer to shoot in 24. I don't know if the iCatch 50 is actually capable of shooting at 24 frames a second or not. But if it's not, I'll take the 4K at 30. Another con is the image stabilization seems a little wobbly. Just a little bit. Now, I will say that the update that ThiEYE did for the T5E that I just did the other day, it shows a massive improvement in the image stabilization. So I think that they can work on that a little bit more. Here is something that was a pro and is kind of a con. They did fix the audio firmware issue where they flip-flopped the on-off for wind noise reduction. But in the changelog, they also noted that they improved the audio quality. While that is very true, it's also a little on the hot side. And what I mean by that is, in the video, I actually had to bring down the audio level of the camera down 2 decibels just to keep it from clipping, because it started to clip very easily. So, you know, but then again, you know, when it comes to an action camera that you've got nice loud audio, is that a problem? You know, hard to tell. Another con that I have with this camera is that it does not offer 1080 at 30. I don't know why that is. You know, a lot of people, they use 30 frames a second, so maybe that's something that ThiEYE can add on in a firmware update. This is kind of a big one. When you're changing resolutions on the camera, let's say you're changing from 4K to 1080, and let's say you go down and you want to do something with distortion correction, anytime you start changing things in the navigation menu, all of a sudden the image stabilization is off. So you always have to make sure that image stabilization is on if you're changing resolution modes. Is that a con? I'm sure that is, you know, it's an extra step. I wish that either image stabilization is on for all resolutions or it's off for all resolutions. So, but you shouldn't have to be able to always go back and make sure that electronic image stabilization has been turned on. And the last con that I have with this camera is the saturation level. It seems a little bit oversaturated, but then again, that's something that can be easily fixed in post, because, you know, there's a lot of cameras out there that do not give you good saturation at all, and you have to actually add that in post. But I will say that the colors look very nice and warm, and they're very vivid. There is no option in the menu system to adjust sharpness or to adjust contrast, but I think the contrast is nice. I think that the sharpness is nice, although some of the distant objects, like the tree lines, were just a little bit on the soft side when anything up close was nice and sharp. All in all, given the fact that the price point on this camera, where you can get it in, it's like $119 range. Sometimes you can find a coupon with it that'll get it down to the $100 range. I think it's a great buy, considering that it's native 4K. All in all, do I like this camera? I think for the price point, and given the fact that ThiEYE is really paying very good attention to the firmwares, yes, I think it's a great buy. I definitely give it 2 thumbs up. I will put a link in the description below to the ThiEYE E7 for you to check out. I tell you, the competition's getting tough out there, and ThiEYE is definitely stepping up to the plate. By the way, if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit that like button, share the video, because there's a lot of people that are looking for an action camera that has the capability of shooting 4K natively with image stabilization. This is definitely a contender. So I hope you guys have yourself a great day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.